On an autumn evening in 2014, Lily Thompson, a 29-year-old female delivery driver, received an order from a customer in a remote area far from the small Texas town where she lived. She drove her old pickup truck, unaware that this trip would be the last time anyone in town would see her. After that, Lily vanished without a trace. No one knew where she had gone, and her vehicle was never found. 9 years later, a team of oil drillers working in that desolate area discovered a buried pickup truck beneath the ground. And just like that, a secret that had lain dormant for nearly a decade was awakened. The town where James Thompson lived was now quieter than ever, with peaceful mornings and gloomy, unanswered nights. But one day, something unexpected happened. It was a dry morning with a light breeze drifting in from the desert land. An oil drilling team was working in a remote area of Texas. Their job was simple: drill for oil, something they had been doing for years. But that day, as they drilled deep into the ground, their equipment suddenly came to a halt. "What did we hit?" one of the workers shouted, eyes wide as he looked toward the drill hole. A loud thunk rang out as the drill hit something hard. Assuming it was rock or debris, they pulled the drill back up, only to discover an old pickup truck buried underground. "What kind of truck is this?" Jim Patterson, the supervisor of the drilling crew, stepped forward and inspected the vehicle. "Looks like an old truck. Seems like it's been buried for a long time." "Something's not right. We need to call the police immediately," another worker said, his voice trembling with uncertainty. When the police arrived on the scene and confirmed that the truck belonged to Lily Thompson, the clues began to surface. However, the truth was still far off. There was no trace of the missing woman, no body, no blood, no evidence of her presence at the scene. Just the truck, an old, worthless object to most. But for James Thompson, it was the only lead he had about his daughter's disappearance. At that moment, James was sitting at home, staring at a photograph of Lily on the table. He had just finished jotting down notes in a notebook that documented his 9-year search. Each day had passed like a stretch of pain, but he had never given up hope. Suddenly his phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was an unfamiliar number, but James picked up anyway. "Mr. Thompson, this is Sheriff Nathaniel Carter. I have important news to share with you." The sheriff's voice was steady, but carried an unmistakable tension. "We've found your daughter's truck." James's heart nearly stopped. A numb sensation spread through his entire body. "What? Lily's truck?" His voice caught, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Yes, Mr. Thompson, her vehicle. We're in the process of confirming the details, but we need you to come down and verify it," Carter continued, his tone dropping slightly. "We haven't found any sign of her in or around the vehicle, but I believe you should be informed." James couldn't believe what he was hearing. His thoughts spiraled. Memories of his daughter, of the days spent searching, of the constant worry, came rushing back all at once. "I'll come right away." "Thank you, Sheriff Carter," James said, his voice barely audible. Moments later, James was on the road to the site. The road was still long and winding, just as he remembered, but everything now felt different. A heavy feeling of anxiety consumed him, as if he was about to face a truth he wasn't sure he could handle. When he arrived, the scene before him was unlike anything he had imagined. A team of police officers was actively working, surrounding the old truck that had been unearthed from a large pit. Ropes and cranes were lifting the vehicle out of the ground, revealing dirt and rust encrusting its surface. "Mr. Thompson, we're very sorry to have called you here under these circumstances." Sheriff Carter approached, his expression more serious than ever. "We've confirmed this is your daughter's vehicle, Lily Thompson's." "Then, where is she?" James asked, his voice shaking, eyes scanning the area for any sign of his daughter. But there was nothing, just the truck, the very truck he had searched for over the years, a truck he never imagined she would simply abandon. "We haven't found anything beyond the vehicle. No remains, no trace of her." Carter lowered his head. We need your confirmation so we can proceed. This is the first step in uncovering the truth behind her disappearance." James stared at the truck, as if hoping the daughter he loved would step out from inside. An overwhelming sense of dread filled him, something he couldn't quite explain. Where was she all this time? She would never just vanish like this without a trace. "We understand, Mr. Thompson, but in this case, the only thing we have is this truck," Carter said, his voice softening. "We'll do everything we can to uncover the truth." From deep within, a question nagged at James, a question he couldn't shake. Did she really leave on her own? Or did someone take her? Hope and doubt clung together like a thin curtain, obscuring the truth. James silently watched the vehicle, his eyes filled with pain and suspicion. The questions remained unanswered, and the truth, whether near or far, remained a mystery yet to be revealed. James stood beside the truck, his mind spinning with scattered thoughts. Lily's pickup truck, the one he had seen thousands of times over the years, was now being lifted from the ground, like an ancient relic long forgotten. But as he looked at it, his heart filled with doubt and pain. Was this a sign of hope, or merely an old wound being torn open? Sheriff Carter stood beside him in silence, observing. The police officers and oil workers were busy gathering evidence, but Carter's eyes remained fixed on the truck. "We need to run a thorough inspection," he said, his voice dropping low. "So she was here," James muttered, voice hoarse. "She ran away? Did she disappear just like that?" Sheriff Carter didn't answer immediately. He motioned for the police team to continue their work. James stood nearby, his eyes following every movement of the investigators, but inside him, the unease wouldn't fade. He just wanted to see Lily, to know whether she was alive. But now, all he had was endless silence. A police officer approached, holding a small wallet in his hand. "Mr. Thompson, we found your daughter's wallet." His tone was cautious, yet it couldn't mask the discomfort of handing over such a memory-laden item. James took the wallet, feeling his hand tremble. Every little detail of it felt like an open wound in his heart. It was a worn brown leather wallet, aged with time. Its shape was familiar. He remembered Lily always carrying it to work. But when he opened it, James saw more than money and bank cards. He found something that nearly shattered him. Lily's hair tie, still tangled with a few short brown strands. A tiny item, but enough to make his chest tighten with anguish. "I can't believe this. Is this a sign?" "What does this mean, Carter?" James murmured, his eyes blurred with tears. Sheriff Carter didn't know what to say. He could only stand in silence, unable to ease the pain of a father who might be facing the unimaginable. "We'll continue the investigation," Carter finally said, his voice softening, as if he could feel the grief in every word. "We suspect this is more than just a missing person case. She may have been abducted." James sighed. A hollow feeling enveloped him. The wallet, the hair tie, these things seemed to confirm something he couldn't bear to admit. Lily may not have just left on her own. "She was kidnapped, wasn't she?" James asked, his voice faltering. "Possibly," Carter replied, though he couldn't say for certain. "This isn't a normal disappearance. The truck was deliberately buried, James. Someone went out of their way to hide it. No one does that without a reason." A worker walked up holding a transparent plastic bag. Inside were several of Lily's personal belongings, a wristwatch, a small photo, and a tiny notebook. Each item felt like a piece of the past, pulling James back to memories of Lily, the only daughter he loved beyond words. "Everything's been disturbed," Carter said. "We need to dig deeper into what happened over the last 9 years. But one thing's for sure, there's a very big secret waiting to be uncovered." James couldn't help but shiver at those words. A chill spread through him. What secret? What's being hidden? "We'll find out," Carter assured him. "But first, we need more evidence. She couldn't have disappeared without someone knowing something." James stood there, holding the items in his hands, feeling numb. He looked around, hoping for a sign to lead him forward. But all he had was the pickup truck, Lily's truck, now just a trace of the past. "Sheriff Carter," James said, his eyes suddenly lighting up, as if something had sparked in his mind. There must be someone who knew about this. She couldn't have vanished without a trace. Someone helped her disappear. "We're going to investigate everything, Mr. Thompson," Carter replied. "I'll head back to headquarters to review the records. It's been a long time and we'll need to dig deep. I'll contact you when we have new information." James looked at the pickup one last time, his heart twisting. Everything was becoming clearer now. His daughter couldn't have just disappeared. Someone had helped her vanish, and someone might still be hiding the truth. And James knew, no matter what, he wouldn't give up. This journey wasn't his alone. It was one for an entire family still waiting for answers. The police had asked James to come down to the station for further questioning regarding Lily's disappearance. It was the third time since her truck had been found, and this time, Sheriff Nathaniel Carter wanted to clarify what exactly had happened on that night, the night Lily went missing. James stepped into the interrogation room, his eyes weary and filled with anxiety. Although there were now new leads, everything still felt just out of reach. Sheriff Carter sat across from him, the light from the desk lamp casting shadows across his face, highlighting the deep wrinkles and the stern look in his eyes. "Mr. Thompson," Sheriff Carter began, his tone calm but unmistakably probing, "we need to get a clearer picture of what happened the night Lily disappeared." James sat down, gripping the arms of the chair tightly. "I've already said, I was in my office from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. working and dealing with some paperwork," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Carter looked directly at him, his gaze unwavering. "There's no one who can confirm that, Mr. Thompson. No one was there to verify you stayed in your office for those 3 hours. James remained silent for a moment, a strange weariness washing over him. "I don't need anyone to confirm it. I was working alone in my office. Everything was normal until I realized Lily hadn't come back." He sighed. "I waited until the next morning to call the police, but I didn't think anything serious had happened." Sheriff Carter jotted down notes in his pad, then suddenly looked up. "You didn't go out looking for your daughter right away? Just because she didn't come back on time, you didn't act immediately?" "No," James answered quickly, his voice slightly flustered. "I didn't think it was that serious. She often got home late when she worked out on deliveries, and I figured maybe she had run into some minor trouble." Sheriff Carter didn't look convinced. "But why weren't you more concerned? Why didn't you call the police right away? Why wait until the next morning?" James went quiet for a long moment. He didn't know how to explain that deep, indescribable fear he had felt when Lily didn't come home that night. The truth was, he hadn't known what to do other than to keep waiting. "That was my mistake," James finally admitted, his voice soft. "I thought she'd come home in the morning, that it was all just something ordinary. But after I called the police, I knew I had been wrong." Sheriff Carter looked at him, and the silence between them only deepened the tension in the room. Then Carter broke the quiet, his voice slicing through the air. "There's something else I need you to explain." James furrowed his brow. "What is it?" Sheriff Carter stared directly into his eyes. "In the first year after Lily disappeared, you said you got drunk and drove around all night looking for her. Do you remember where you went?" James felt a chill run down his spine. That night, the one drowned in alcohol and confusion, had blurred all images, all memories. He had drunk too much, and looking back he couldn't recall where he had gone or what he had done. The details of that night were as hazy as ghosts drifting through a fog, impossible to grasp. That feeling, the sense of something missing, something unreachable, still haunted him, as if there was a hole in his memory he couldn't access. Could it be that in his drunken state he had done something without realizing it? Could it be that in a moment of confusion he had somehow hurt Lily, the only daughter he had ever loved? Had he accidentally done something terrible without even knowing? The questions looped in his mind again and again, and James couldn't find a satisfying answer. Every time he thought of it, his heart grew heavier, the regret crashing over him like relentless waves. But no matter how he thought about it, one thing remained clear. He couldn't give up. He couldn't stop until he knew the truth. James raised his head, his eyes suddenly clouded with confusion. I don't know," he whispered, voice trembling. "I remember leaving the house around 1 a.m., but I don't remember where I went. I might have done something without realizing. And if I did something while I was drunk, I won't be able to forgive myself." Sheriff Carter said nothing. He simply wrote in his notebook. The question of Lily's disappearance still hung in the air, unanswered. "We'll need more time to investigate," Carter finally said, his tone softening. "So we'll continue monitoring this case." James felt exhausted, like a vehicle that had run too long without a brake. "I don't remember what I did, but one thing I do know, Sheriff, I can't stop looking for my daughter." Sheriff Carter looked at him for a moment and nodded. "You may go, but remember, if you come across any new lead, you need to report it to us immediately." James stood up, his hand shaking as he picked up his coat. "I won't stop. I won't stop until I find the truth." Sheriff Carter said nothing else. James walked out of the interrogation room, but inside him, the unanswered questions still clung like shadows in the dark. The suspicion toward himself gnawed at his peace. Could he be the only one who truly knew what happened that night? Late one evening, as James sat alone in his kitchen, a sense of emptiness enveloped him. The house had grown silent. No more footsteps of Lily, no more laughter from the days before his daughter vanished. Everything was drowned in the gloom of the past. He held a cup of hot coffee in his hand, but his mind was in disarray. The weight of hopelessness pressed harder. The truth was still too vague, and hope seemed all but gone. Suddenly, the phone on the table rang, startling him. James looked at the screen and saw the name, Lucas Granger. It was the older brother of Jack Granger, the police officer who had once investigated Lily's disappearance. Jack had been the only person James believed might help unravel the mystery. But strangely, after the case was closed, Jack abruptly quit his job and disappeared. That only deepened James's suspicions. James answered the call but didn't say anything right away. Only the sound of heavy breathing came from the other end. "Hello, James Thompson," Lucas's voice came through, low and steady. "You are—" "Lucas Granger. I'm Jack Granger's older brother, the one who handled Lily Thompson's case back then. You remember, don't you?" Lucas's voice trembled slightly. James's heart pounded. He gripped the phone tightly, anxiety rising in his chest. "Of course I remember. But why are you calling me?" he asked hoarsely. Lucas was silent for a moment, seemingly gathering his thoughts. "You know, ever since Jack vanished during that investigation, our family has been devastated. I've been looking for him for years, but not a single trace. I refuse to believe he just walked away from his job and family." James's stomach twisted. Lucas's words only added to his growing unease. Jack had left shortly after the case was shut down. His sudden disappearance had always left James wondering if it was somehow connected to Lily's. "What are you suggesting?" James asked, tension in his voice. "I think someone forced Jack to leave. Someone didn't want him talking about what he found during Lily's case," Lucas replied, his tone tightening. "I need your help, James. I heard the police are reopening her file. There may be new leads. I can't keep looking for Jack alone. You're the only one who can help me. If we work together, we might uncover something." James felt as if something was clenching his heart. He couldn't stop thinking about what Lucas had just said. Part of him wanted to believe it, but another part hesitated. Jack had vanished without a trace, and now everything seemed to be pointing back to Lily. Doubts hovered like shadows in the corners of his mind. "Where should we meet?" James asked, trying to keep his voice from betraying his nerves. "Let's talk at the coffee shop. I'll tell you everything," Lucas answered, his voice laced with something unspoken. James hung up, heart still pounding. He stood, walked to the door, and grabbed his coat. He didn't know where this meeting would lead, but he understood one thing. He couldn't pass up this chance. A sliver of hope, however faint, was all he had left. The cafe was in a quiet part of town, a place locals often visited to unwind after a long day. The smell of coffee hung warmly in the air, and the dim lighting gave the space a comfort that contrasted with the chill inside James. He stepped inside and spotted Lucas sitting in a familiar corner booth. The man looked worn, with dark circles under his eyes, but when he saw James, a faint smile crossed his face. "James," Lucas called out, raising a hand, "have a seat." James sat down across from him, saying nothing at first. A strange tension filled the space between them. Lucas looked at him for a moment before speaking. "I don't believe Jack just walked away without saying a word." "That's not who he was," Lucas began. "Do you remember the last time we talked about Lily?" James nodded silently. "I remember, but I still don't understand why Jack disappeared. After the case was closed, he vanished. No sign, no proof that he was okay. I've always suspected something more was going on." Lucas's eyes lit up with quiet resolve. "I think Jack uncovered something while working on Lily's case. Something big, something he wasn't supposed to find, and I believe he was forced to quit to keep silent." James listened, anxiety tightening in his chest. A strange feeling came over him, as if all things were orbiting a secret he couldn't yet touch. "What do you think Jack found?" "I'm not sure," Lucas replied seriously, "but I know one thing. If we don't act now, we may never know the truth." James looked into Lucas's eyes, unease gnawing at him. "What do you want me to do?" "We need to trace Jack's last steps and find out what he discovered." "I know you're the only one who can help me," Lucas said, his voice sincere. "Will you do it?" James glanced out the window where darkness had swallowed the street. He felt the weight of everything pressing down on his shoulders, but part of him couldn't say no. "All right, I'll help you," James said, his voice lowering. "I think we should start by going back to the spot where Lily's truck was found. It's the newest lead we have." Inside, James felt a creeping anxiety he couldn't shake. Whatever they were about to uncover might change everything, and he didn't know if it would be salvation or devastation. That night, James and Lucas once again headed toward the area where Lily's truck had been discovered. The road grew increasingly desolate and hazy as their car sped past barren fields, surrounded only by the dull brown of sand and dry, lifeless grass. Neither of them spoke. Only the hum of the engine echoed in the stillness of this forsaken land. As the car pulled up near the site where Lily's truck had been found, James suddenly felt a chilling cold envelop him. He opened the door and stepped outside, his eyes fixed on the patch of earth where the old truck had been buried for so many years. The landscape around him seemed blurry, indistinct, like a veil of invisible fog clouding his mind. As he walked, a heaviness rose in his chest. A sudden thought flashed through his mind so vividly that he stopped in his tracks, staring into the void ahead. In that moment, James felt as though he was being pulled into a strange hallucination. He saw himself, on a pitch-black night, standing in that barren field, a shovel in hand. In that vision, he saw himself digging into the earth, burying Lily's truck, along with the only daughter he had ever loved. It was an image so clear, so detailed, that James couldn't tell whether it was real or simply a distorted creation of his troubled mind. Fear spread through his body, his heart pounding. His vision blurred, and his limbs grew heavy. "James!" a voice called out nearby, pulling him back from his daze. Lucas stood beside him, his eyes filled with concern. "Are you okay? What's going on?" James turned to look at Lucas, his eyes swimming with confusion and pain. I think I did something," he said, his voice rasping with emotion. "Maybe I hurt Lily. Maybe I'm the one who killed her." Lucas stared at him, stunned. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "James, no, you can't think that. You didn't do anything. Don't let these thoughts take over your mind." James lowered his head, his hand gripping the car door tightly. He felt as though he was about to collapse, the weight of years of guilt and dark thoughts pressing down on him, making it hard to breathe. He wondered, could it be that he had done it? Could he, in a drunken state, have committed something terrible he now mistook for a nightmare? "Lucas," James's voice trembled. "I don't know anymore. After all these years, what did I do? I searched for Lily. I called her name. But could I have done something horrible in that moment? I may have hurt her and not even remembered. All I recall from that night is darkness. And now I'm not sure I can even trust myself." Lucas shook his head, stepping closer. "You can't think like that. You need to stay calm. Be clear. You can't blame yourself. You've done everything you could. And now we have to keep searching for the truth." James said nothing, only stared at the ground. Lucas's words weren't enough to drive out the waves of fog clouding his thoughts. The guilt, the pain, rose inside him like a storm, crashing over his mind in relentless tides. "You know something, Lucas," James said, his voice breaking. "I don't even believe in my ability to do anything anymore. I can't keep living with this doubt." Lucas looked at him, worry etched into his face, but with a flicker of encouragement in his eyes. "James, don't say that. We don't have all the evidence. You can't keep punishing yourself. We'll find the truth. Don't let fear blind you. What we need now is patience and determination." James lifted his gaze to the night sky, his mind made up. He would uncover the truth about Jack and his daughter. And after that, he would turn himself in. He could no longer live in the shadow of guilt and torment. Lucas stayed silent, saying nothing more. The two men stood there gazing into the vast emptiness of the wild land before them, where questions still lingered, and truth lay buried, waiting to be unearthed. James and Lucas stood behind a low hill, silently observing the surroundings, their eyes fixed on the old, worn-out spot where Lily's truck had once been found. They were about to leave when a slight movement to the right caught their attention. A black truck had stopped. No headlights, only darkness, cloaked the vehicle, forcing James and Lucas to freeze and hold their breath. "Do you see that?" Lucas whispered, eyes locked on the truck. James nodded, replying quietly, "Someone's here." They moved silently, careful not to leave a trace. The terrain was familiar, yet the tension remained sharp and unrelenting. As they edged closer, a shadowy figure stepped out from the truck, and James immediately recognized him, Sheriff Nathaniel Carter. James squinted, suspicion tightening in his chest, while Lucas stared in disbelief. "What is he doing here?" Lucas muttered under his breath. James didn't answer, but a strange feeling swelled in his chest. Carter, the man who'd been helping him search for Lily all these years, why was he here now at this hour? The question echoed in his mind, gnawing at his gut with growing unease. Suddenly a sound broke the silence. A ringtone from Carter's phone. James and Lucas leaned in closer, carefully avoiding detection. If they made a noise now, they'd blow their cover. Then a voice came through the speaker, cold and authoritative. "Carter, we've got a situation," the voice said. "We need to move more shipments to the west sector. It has to be quick. We can't afford exposure." Carter paused for a moment before responding. "I've got it handled. You'll get what you need. Stick to the plan. I'll keep everything under control." A chill ran down James's spine. Shipments? Plan? He thought. What was going on? That night, he didn't just help us, Lucas whispered, anger rising in his voice. He's been helping that cartel. James's mind snapped into focus. Something much bigger was being hidden. The two men continued moving along the dirt path, staying back but keeping a close watch on Carter. Suddenly, Carter turned and got back into his vehicle, seemingly preparing to leave. James and Lucas ducked behind a nearby tree, still undetected. Moments later, another vehicle arrived, a black SUV marked with telltale signs of gang affiliation. The driver got out and walked toward Carter. The two exchanged a few quick words, though James and Lucas couldn't make out what they were saying. James's heart raced. Carter, a lawman, a supposed ally, was working with criminals. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. Lucas was no longer able to hold back. "What do we do, James?" he asked, his voice tense with fury. "We expose him. He's part of this entire operation," James said firmly, voice low but resolute. They stayed in hiding, keeping watch as Carter moved about, unaware of being tracked. Night had fully settled, and they used their phones to record everything. Movements, exchanges, gestures. Every frame was a piece of damning evidence. When Carter stopped at what appeared to be a hidden rendezvous point, likely to meet more gang members, James and Lucas crept even closer. Lucas pulled James behind a rock outcrop. James raised his phone and filmed everything in silence. Everything was going smoothly until a noise shattered the calm. Tires screeched on gravel. Carter had seen them. "Run!" James yelled, grabbing Lucas by the arm. The two bolted from cover, sprinting through bushes and across the uneven terrain. They reached their car and jumped in. Carter was already in pursuit. His engine roared to life, and the chase began. James and Lucas sped off, weaving through rough paths and dodging shrubs. Carter's vehicle was closing in fast. They couldn't afford to get caught, not with this evidence. Every second counted. "Go faster! We need to get out of here!" Lucas shouted, gripping the door handle. James pushed the car to its limit. They couldn't fail now. Thankfully, they reached a main road, escaping the narrow terrain where Carter had the advantage. Their hearts pounded, but they didn't stop. They drove hard toward the nearest federal law enforcement office, the only place they believed would be safe from local corruption. Finally, they reached the station. Bathed in cold fluorescent light, James and Lucas rushed inside, phones in hand. "We have evidence of a drug cartel deal and Sheriff Carter's involvement," James said hoarsely, his voice strained but unwavering. One of the federal officers looked at them with a stern expression, then quickly took the phone. "You've done the right thing," the officer said. "We'll take it from here." Lucas exhaled deeply, relieved, but James remained tense. His mind was spinning. This was only the beginning, and darker secrets were yet to be revealed. After receiving the video and evidence from James and Lucas, the federal police immediately launched a serious investigation. There was no longer any doubt. Sheriff Nathaniel Carter had ties to a drug cartel. Federal agents quickly verified the footage and worked around the clock to prepare for his arrest. The following day, in a cold interrogation room, Sheriff Carter was arrested and forced to face federal officers. He was given no chance to deny anything. Carter sat there, no longer the stoic man he once was, his eyes now filled with fear. The interrogation began, focusing on the shadowy connections he had maintained for years with the cartel. "How long have you been protecting this cartel?" one officer asked, his voice cold. Carter was silent for a moment, then finally sighed, offered a strained smile, and answered, "Years, probably 9. I helped them, covered their tracks, cleaned up messes, and made sure no one found out." "So, how much did you make from all of it?" another officer continued. "Enough to live well," Carter replied, not hiding the truth, but his tone was steeped in defeat. "It wasn't all easy. But the benefits from those guys, it was enough to buy silence and protection, the deals, the secrets, And I was just following orders." The officer slammed the table. "When was the first deal? Describe it in full detail." 9 years ago, I helped them transport goods using a police vehicle to an area outside of town. That run didn't go very smoothly, but everything was handled because I took care of someone who saw what they weren't supposed to." The officers exchanged glances. One stepped forward and tapped the table. "Who was it? 9 years ago? In Texas, there were only a handful of missing persons cases." Carter visibly trembled, unable to hide his fear. He looked down at the table, his eyes distant. "Her name? Lily Thompson. She saw something none of us wanted her to see. She saw them loading the shipment, moving drugs through back roads. I just wanted to silence the situation. I told her to stay quiet, but she wouldn't, so I followed their orders. I didn't want to, but I had no choice." Carter's confession cast a suffocating silence over the room. He had just admitted not only his involvement with the drug cartel, but also his role in Lily's disappearance. What he revealed became a vital lead. That first drug deal, shrouded in secrecy, now pointed directly to Lily, not as a random bystander, but as someone pulled into a hidden world Carter had spent years protecting. "So where is Lily now? What did you do with her?" an officer snapped, glaring at Carter. Carter only bowed his head. "I don't know her exact location, but she's alive. She's being held at one of the cartel's hideouts." Immediately, the federal officers began reinforcing their case, preparing to move on the cartel's strongholds. They had operated in the shadows far too long, but now, with Carter's testimony, they finally had a real chance to strike. They started by collecting intelligence from previous drug transactions, locating hidden storage facilities, and mapping out areas frequently visited by cartel members. Officers worked relentlessly, tracing every clue to uncover the precise locations of key hideouts. These could lead them not only to evidence, but also to Lily. Carter couldn't stop talking now. Piece by piece, he revealed how the massive criminal network functioned, details he had buried deep for nearly a decade. The federal agents, alongside support units, began developing a detailed plan to raid the cartel's base. Everything had to happen swiftly. Any delay could result in the kingpins vanishing once again. Carter's confessions became the key that unlocked the door, not just to exposing him, but to launching a sweeping investigation into the broader operations of this drug empire. After receiving information from Carter, Lucas and the police officers quickly coordinated to pinpoint the location where Lily might have been held. With the assistance of Special Forces units, James and Lucas conducted an investigation and discovered an abandoned farm on the outskirts of the city, most likely the site where Lily had been imprisoned. It was a remote area, nearly impossible to detect without crucial leads. Finally, after 9 long and tense years of waiting, Lily was rescued from the dark, dreadful basement where she had been confined. Police stormed in, freed her, and brought her to safety. She was so emaciated that her spine and wrist bones protruded under pale skin like a ghost of her former self. Her face was gaunt, eyes sunken and dark, void of life. Her arms and legs were covered with layers of old and new wounds, marks of beatings and abuse she had endured for years. A long scar ran from her arm up to near her neck, and bruises that hadn't yet healed indicated she had been in pain right before the rescue. As officers helped her outside, her legs gave way beneath her as if she no longer had the strength to walk. She staggered, her gaze dazed, like someone waking from a long, unending nightmare. Her hand trembled as she tried to grip the soldier's arm, but only barely, as her frail body couldn't bear the lingering pain. But the moment she saw James, her father, Lily's eyes lit up with hope, and she collapsed into his arms, sobbing. After regaining some strength, Lily began to recount what had happened during those 9 lost years. from the night she disappeared to the day she was found in that basement. I remember that night clearly, Lily began, her voice shaky but steady. I had just finished delivering an order in that area and noticed something odd. The boxes I was delivering were unusually heavy. At first, I thought it was because of the large quantity, but when I looked closely, I saw the labels didn't match the delivery slip. And what was even stranger, the recipient wasn't the name listed on the order. But I still completed the delivery like usual. Lily paused, her eyes filled with a deep sorrow, as if trying to return to that moment in her mind. I felt something was wrong, so I decided to go back and watch. I took photos of the boxes and of two men loading them onto a black truck with no license plate. But as I was about to call the police, one of them saw me. I didn't have time to do anything. They chased me down. She choked up, a wave of helplessness washing over her again. They knocked me unconscious, and then I woke up in a dark, damp basement. I didn't know where I was. All I could hear were their footsteps. These people, they were part of an underground network, drug traffickers. Lily continued, each word cutting deeper into James's heart. I was kept there for years. They never let me outside. There was nothing but darkness and silence. Once I tried to escape, but I saw another girl shot dead right in front of me when she attempted the same. They shot her the moment she tried to leave the area. Lily looked at her father, her eyes filled with fear and worry, but also the strength of someone who had endured far too much. I couldn't do anything. I had to pretend to obey them to survive. If I didn't, I would have been the next to die. James looked at Lily, his eyes full of unspeakable pain and sorrow. He had no words, only a hand clinging tightly to his daughter's, unwilling to let go. Everything he thought he had lost was now in front of him, in the form of the daughter who had been missing all these years. "You've been so strong," James whispered, his voice breaking, unable to say more. Lily stopped crying, her eyes still moist. "I'm not strong, Dad, but I had to survive, to tell this story, to let people know the truth. That girl, she didn't live to tell anyone what happened, but I did, and I won't let them keep hurting others." James held her hand tightly, gazing into her resolute eyes. This wasn't just a story of a missing person. It was a call to action, an effort to tear apart the darkness this cartel had cast over everything. They would pay, and James now had nothing left to fear. Lily sat on the hospital bed, her empty eyes staring out the window as if she were trying to detach herself from the world around her. Her body was thin and frail, yet in her gaze there remained a flicker of unbreakable resilience. The door to her hospital room creaked open softly, and a group of police officers entered, among them Detective Rodriguez. Lily didn't lift her head right away, but when she heard the footsteps, her lips moved slightly, as if she already sensed what was about to happen. "Hello, Miss Walker." Detective Rodriguez spoke gently, stepping closer to her bed. "We found the body of the girl you witnessed, and now we need a few more details to complete the investigation file." Lily looked up, her eyes red, but no tears fell. She stared at Rodriguez for a long moment before shaking her head, as though carefully choosing her words. "My daughter," Lily began, her voice faint. "Her name was Emma. I saw them kill her when she tried to escape." Rodriguez sat beside the bed, watching Lily with compassion. "Can you tell us more? We need to know everything." Lily sighed softly, her eyes drifting down to her hands, small, fragile, clenched tightly. "I couldn't do anything. They caught her, dragged her to the ground. I was too scared to move. I just watched. I heard them say where they would bury her. I remember every word. Bury her there, near the old fuel depot, close to the abandoned house." Rodriguez scribbled in his notebook, then looked at her, his eyes filled with empathy but also determination. "We'll act on this immediately, Miss Walker. Thank you for telling us. This is a critical lead. The fuel depot. The abandoned house, Lily whispered, still haunted by the memory. I don't want to remember, but I can't forget. A few hours later, the police found Emma's body, just as Lily had described. They also uncovered a massive underground drug cache near the area she had pointed out. It became clear to the investigators that this site had long been a base of operations for the drug cartel. With the new evidence, investigators finally concluded that it wasn't just a cartel operating there, but a hub of decadence tied to powerful elites. But what shocked James the most was a disturbing realization: faint, disjointed images that had haunted him during drunken nights. He recalled strange dreams in which he had seen a vehicle buried in the sand, visions he once dismissed as hallucinations. When he heard that Lily's truck had indeed been buried in that exact area, James felt the full weight of a horrible truth crashing down on him. It hadn't been a nightmare. He had seen it in a drunken stupor, and now the truth stood clearly before him. "God damn it," James muttered, his face pale. "I saw it. I saw my daughter's truck buried." Rage and guilt surged through him, and he had no choice but to confront the crushing reality. Lily looked at him, her eyes welling with tears. "You saw it, didn't you? You saw yourself watching it happen." James could only nod, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. Everything he thought was just a hallucination had turned out to be a brutal truth. "Dad, you couldn't have done anything then," Lily said, her voice cracking. "You couldn't save me, but now you're doing the right thing. I know you'll uncover the truth." James squeezed her hand tightly, tears brimming in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Lily. I didn't do anything." When the gang's hideout was raided, the police also found Jack Granger, the former police officer who had investigated Lily's disappearance, being held captive and subsequently rescued. Jack, who had been involved in the investigation during its early stages, now had to confront a horrifying truth about himself. Jack sat in the recovery room, his eyes bloodshot and weary, looking up at James. He no longer recognized himself after years of brainwashing and being forced to work for the drug cartel. It seemed as though every memory of his former life had been erased. Lucas stood beside him, eyes filled with concern but unwavering resolve. "Jack, are you okay?" Lucas asked, his voice low. Jack didn't respond immediately. He simply closed his eyes, as if trying to escape reality. "I don't know what to say. I can't remember everything that happened." His voice trembled, every word threatening to break. Lucas sat beside him, gently gripping his hand, his eyes filled with empathy. "You don't have to say anything if you're not ready. But you have to understand, what happened wasn't your fault. They forced you to do those things." Jack looked at Lucas, his eyes brimming with tears. "I helped them. I protected them. I covered up their crimes. But I don't know why I did it." His voice grew weaker. "I can't remember everything, but I know I'm not the same person anymore." Lucas stayed quiet for a moment, feeling the pain in Jack's voice. "You're not a bad person, Jack. You're not guilty. They brainwashed you. They used you." Jack turned away, his expression tormented. "Yeah, I'm not myself anymore. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was still investigating. But in the end, I was just a pawn in their game." He choked, clenching his fists. Lucas sighed, placing a hand on Jack's shoulder, unable to hide the worry in his eyes. "You need to understand, they are the criminals, not you. They forced you to do things you never wanted. Now, we can still change things." Jack looked at Lucas, despair etched in his eyes. "But what did I do? I protected them. I helped them hide everything. How can I forgive myself for helping them cover up their crimes?" "You're not the villain here, Jack. They are. "Now that you're free, help me and Lily expose them to the police," Lucas said firmly. Jack nodded slowly, as if he no longer had the strength to resist. "There's no going back. But I'll help. I'll do the right thing." He looked up at Lucas, a faint glimmer of hope returning to his eyes. "We'll uncover the truth together," Lucas replied, a renewed sense of purpose in his voice. "The price we've paid is too high, but now it's time to fight back." Lily and James also came to visit Jack. James placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. "Thank you for being the one to keep searching for my daughter when everyone else assumed she'd run away. No matter what happened, I believe you tried to do the right thing." They exchanged looks, eyes set firmly on the path ahead. Just then a police officer entered the room holding a folder. "We've reviewed all the cases overlooked in the past 8 years. The information Jack provided is extremely valuable. We've uncovered illicit ties between Sheriff Carter and the drug cartel." James looked into Jack's eyes, a sharp clarity forming in his mind. No words were needed. He understood that this information would be a major turning point in uncovering the truth behind Lily's disappearance. Lily looked around at everyone, her gaze serious. "If all this is true, we can't stop now. Sheriff Carter must pay." "You're right," Jack said, his eyes burning with resolve. "I'll work with you. We can't let them keep hurting innocent people. I survived, and now it's time for me to do what's right." As the officer left to continue the investigation, James, Lily, and Jack sat together. Each of them was mentally prepared for the next battle. This was no longer just about Lily's case. It was about exposing the criminal network and the deep-rooted corruption Sheriff Carter and his allies had cultivated over the years. "Things will change," James said firmly. "We're not going to let these people run wild anymore." Lily looked at her father, her eyes filled with hope. "I believe we will succeed because we never give up." The three of them, each bearing their scars, stood united in the fight for truth and justice. With the support of special task forces, Lily and James continued the hunt for the remaining members of the drug cartel. Law enforcement raided suspected locations one by one, arresting fugitives and those who had aided the criminal organization. Several gang members were apprehended while preparing for a major drug deal. The others, those who had supported and protected the gang from the shadows, could no longer hide. In the end, the entire criminal network was dismantled. The trial of Sheriff Nathaniel Carter lasted for days, with thousands of residents and media outlets in attendance. The evidence presented in court exposed all of Carter's corruption, crimes, and moral decay, shocking everyone who once believed he stood for justice. For the first time throughout the lengthy investigation, Carter stood in court, looking weary and broken. Gone was his former confidence. The wrinkles on his face had deepened, and his eyes reflected regret, though it was not nearly enough to atone for the atrocities he had committed. When called to the witness stand, Carter lowered his head, his breath shaky. He began to testify, his voice hoarse, as if struggling with painful memories. "Honestly, I never wanted it to come to this," Carter began, his hands trembling. "At first, I only worked for them because I had no other choice. My wife was seriously ill and I didn't have the money for her treatment. The gang offered help and I accepted." He paused briefly, trying to regain composure. "But then I couldn't stop. The deeper I got involved with them, the more I was manipulated. The deals, the cases swept under the rug. I did all of it. I let them control me, use me to cover up their crimes." Carter bowed his head, letting out a heavy sigh. "And I watched myself change. From a police officer, I became a tool for criminals. I didn't know how to escape the mess. I lost myself. Now, I don't know how to make amends for everything I've done." As Carter finished, testimonies from the cartel leaders were introduced. One key member confessed, Our operations weren't just with drug dealers. We had ties with tycoons, powerful figures, people willing to do anything to protect their interests. Documents and phone call records released by investigators connected Sheriff Carter to these powerful individuals, causing a chilling silence in the courtroom. Among them were recordings between Carter and Miguel Salazar, names Lily remembered overhearing during her captivity. What were once distant whispers were now undeniable evidence. An investigator stood and declared gravely, "We've discovered that Sheriff Carter took bribes from Salazar's cartel. He worked with them for years, shielding illegal transactions and covering up drug-related crimes." Lily swallowed hard, feeling a chill run through her body as the truths she once feared were now public. James sat beside her, gripping her hand tightly, his eyes filled with both determination and sorrow. Lily could sense the exhaustion in him, but also knew that the past 9 years had not been in vain. A former gang member, now a witness, sighed and said, "Carter wasn't the only one involved. He manipulated the entire police system. Senior officers protected us, helped us avoid investigations." Lily looked at James, then at the documents presented. The evidence showed that Carter didn't just protect Salazar's gang, he also aided other tycoons, helping them avoid legal consequences related to illicit business and land deals. Secret meetings had been held in luxury hotels where financial agreements were signed between Carter and powerful criminals. Another investigator added, "We've found proof that Carter protected drug transactions and other illegal deals of major tycoons. Even murder, kidnapping, and other crimes were hidden by his hand." Lily shivered. The memories of the past 9 years returned with painful clarity. Conversations between Carter and Salazar were no longer hazy echoes. They were real. When the documents were revealed, the courtroom was stunned. Officials in law enforcement who had ties to drug lords and tycoons now faced criminal prosecution. Internal audits were launched, uncovering widespread corruption that shook the public. "We can't let this continue," a final investigator declared. "Carter and the others must be held accountable." Lily exhaled deeply, eyes fixed on the courtroom screen. Her body had endured immense suffering, but a wave of relief swept through her. Justice, though delayed, had arrived. She gripped James's hand. "We did it, Lily," James whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Justice will never abandon us again." Lily nodded, her eyes still on the screen. She knew that although the wounds remained, love and perseverance had carried them through brutality and corruption. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you, everyone," Lily whispered. "At last, the truth is out." Lily and Jack stood together in front of Emma's modest grave, the late afternoon sunlight seeming just as somber as their mood. Lily placed a fresh bouquet on the grave, her eyes brimming with tears but filled with resolve. She gently laid her hand on the headstone and whispered, "You don't have to suffer anymore. You deserved a better life." Jack stood beside her, his gaze filled with empathy as he remembered the dark days Emma had endured. "She was strong, Lily. She lived with hope until she couldn't fight any longer." Lily choked up and bowed her head. I know Emma sacrificed so much to protect others, to help me survive. She deserves to be remembered as a hero." Jack sighed and turned to look at Lily, still lost in thought. "Thank you for never forgetting her," he said. "She would be proud of you." Lily took a deep breath, trying to hold back her emotions. She looked up at the blue sky, where the sunlight finally pierced through the gray clouds. "And I'm grateful for my father, too, for never giving up on me," Lily said, her voice lowering. "Even after all those years, he believed in justice. He believed I was still alive, and he kept searching for me until he had nothing left. It's because of him that I'm standing here today." Jack nodded, his eyes misting over. "We're lucky to have a father like that, and now we don't have to live in fear and pain anymore." Lily looked into the distance, at the green mountains embracing the quiet space around them. "We'll start over, Jack. My family will start over. Even though the wounds remain, I believe that with love and perseverance, we can overcome anything. There's still so much beauty in life waiting ahead." Standing beside her, Jack felt a weight lift off his chest as her words sank in. He placed a hand on her shoulder and said gently, "Yes, we'll start over. We won't let the past dictate our future. The two of us will build a brighter future, one without fear, where we can live free from the shadows of the past." Lily smiled. The scars hadn't fully healed, but she could feel the strength growing inside her. She believed her family, with their love and resilience, would make it through anything. And from today forward, they would walk a new path, one where the light of hope would never go out. At last, the pain of the past no longer controlled their lives. James was finally able to release the guilt of those long years when he couldn't protect his daughter. They had defeated not only the enemies outside, but also the torment within, the true triumph of love, of family, and of unwavering perseverance. In the end, everything had come to a close, but Lily's story, and that of her family, was more than just a journey of search and rescue. It was a battle not only against crime, but also against pain, fear, and the darkness hidden within each of them. After everything, they found peace. Not just because the truth had finally been revealed, but because they held on to hope when all that remained was darkness. For them, what happened belongs to the past. The future is a bright road, paved with hope and belief in the triumph of good. They had emerged from the shadows, and now they move forward with unwavering faith in a better tomorrow, no longer subdued by anything. Because in the end, through every trial life throws our way, faith in justice, the courage to face the truth, and the love of family will always be the light that guides us through the darkness, toward the bright days ahead.